The cafeteria was roaring with noise that day, laughter, shouting, the clang of trays, but then, all of a sudden, it went quiet. Every eye turned toward the girl standing by the corner table, clutching her lunch tray. Her name was Amira, the new girl. She had transferred just 3 days ago, and already, the whispers followed her everywhere she went. She's so weird. Why doesn't she talk? She probably thinks she's better than us. The words floated around her like invisible knives. Amira heard them all but never reacted. She wasn't weird. She wasn't proud. She was just quiet. Too quiet for a place where loudness meant power, where confidence came from how much attention you could grab. She moved like a whisper, spoke only when spoken to, and smiled rarely. To most of the students at Franklin High, that made her an easy target. Every high school has its hierarchy, the loud ones on top, the quiet ones at the bottom. And at Franklin, the top was ruled by Brandon. Brandon was tall, athletic, and confident, the star of the basketball team and the kind of guy teachers loved but classmates feared. His smile could charm anyone, but when that smile turned cold, everyone knew trouble was coming. He was used to being the center of attention, the one people admired or feared. So when Amira walked in, calm, composed, and completely indifferent to his popularity, it irritated him in ways he couldn't explain. At first, it was small things. Brandon and his crew would make little jokes as she passed by in the hall. "Yo, silent girl, you lose your voice or something," someone would say, and the others would burst out laughing. Amira would simply glance at them, expressionless, and keep walking. That silence bothered them. It was like she was stronger than their noise, and they couldn't stand it. By the third day, Brandon had decided that Amira's quiet confidence was some kind of challenge, a threat to his self-proclaimed throne. "She thinks she's too good for us," he muttered to his friend Marcus, loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe we should show her how things work around here." Lunchtime came, and the cafeteria was its usual storm of chatter and chaos. Brandon sat at his usual table, the one in the middle of the room where everyone could see him. Across the room, Amira sat alone in the corner, eating quietly, her eyes focused on her food. She didn't look scared or shy, just peaceful. And somehow, that made Brandon even angrier. "Watch this," he said to his friends, standing up with that arrogant grin that made people cheer him on even when he was cruel. He strolled across the room, pretending to stretch, pretending not to notice the growing crowd watching him. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Amira looked up as his shadow fell across her table. "Hey," Brandon said loudly, the smirk spreading across his face. "You're the new girl, right? What's your name again? Amelia? Amari?" "Amira," she replied softly. Right. Amira." He exaggerated her accent, twisting the syllables in a mocking tone. A few kids nearby chuckled. "So, what's your deal? You too good to talk to people, or you just mute or something?" Amira blinked, setting down her fork. "I just don't talk much," she said simply. That answer, calm, quiet, unbothered, only made him angrier. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to get upset so he could feed off it. But she didn't give him that satisfaction. She just looked at him with those calm, steady eyes, the kind that made him feel smaller without her saying a single word. Brandon's grin faltered. The laughter around them began to fade into silence. People were watching now, waiting. He couldn't back off, that would make him look weak. So he kicked the leg of her chair, hard enough that her tray slid off the table and spilled her lunch onto the floor. The loud clatter echoed through the cafeteria. Gasps rippled across the room. "Oops," Brandon said mockingly. "Guess you should have been more careful." Amira bent down to pick up her things, her hands steady. Brandon leaned closer, trying to provoke her further. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" He laughed, glancing around for approval from his crew. Maybe she's scared, Marcus added, snickering. Look at her, can't even look him in the eye. Still, Amira said nothing. She gathered her things, wiped her hands, and sat back down. The crowd began to laugh again, sensing her silence as weakness. Brandon smirked, feeling victorious. But something in her expression shifted, not anger, not fear, just quiet focus. He didn't notice it. Instead, he took one more step closer and whispered, "You wouldn't last 2 minutes in a fight." Then, to drive his point home, he pretended to throw a knee strike toward her, fast and sharp, stopping just short of her face. Gasps filled the air again. And then, in the blink of an eye, the entire energy of the room changed. Amira moved. She stood, sidestepped smoothly, and before anyone could even process it, her hand caught Brandon's arm, twisted it, and locked it behind his back. It wasn't violent, just firm. Controlled. Effortless. The kind of movement that spoke of years of training and precision. The cafeteria fell silent. Brandon froze, his breath caught in his throat. Amira looked at him, calm as ever, and said softly, "Don't do that again." Her voice wasn't loud. But it carried. Every student in that room heard it, and no one dared to laugh. Amira released him gently, turned, and walked out, leaving behind a cafeteria full of stunned faces and one very embarrassed bully. For the first time, Brandon realized, the quietest person in the room might just be the most dangerous one. Brandon grinned as he kicked the leg of her chair, and with a loud clatter, Amira's lunch tray slid off the table and crashed onto the floor. The spaghetti splattered across her shoes, the milk carton burst open, and the cafeteria exploded with laughter. Brandon's friends howled, slapping each other on the back, while phones began to rise, recording the moment like it was just another lunchtime show. Amira froze for a second, her heart thudding against her ribs. Then, slowly, she bent down to pick up the mess, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from something much deeper. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was restraint. A controlled, practiced kind of calm that came only from someone who had learned, over and over, how to hold their power back. Brandon leaned over her, smirking as she wiped at the floor with a napkin. "What's wrong?" he sneered, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Cat got your tongue?" The crowd roared again, feeding off his arrogance. Someone shouted, "Say something, new girl," but Amira didn't respond. Her face stayed unreadable, quiet, calm, steady. And that made Brandon angrier. He wanted her to react. He wanted her to scream, cry, or at least show that he'd gotten to her. But she didn't. She just kept cleaning, every movement precise, every breath even. That silence, that unbreakable calm, was like a mirror reflecting his cruelty right back at him. And he hated it. So he pushed harder. "Oh, come on," Brandon said, bending down closer until his shadow fell across her face. "You think you're too good for us, huh? You walk around here all quiet like you're better than everyone. What are you, some kind of princess?" He exaggerated her soft accent as he spoke, twisting the words in a mocking tone. "Oh, I'm Amira, I'm so special, I can't talk to normal people." The laughter grew again, cruel and contagious. One of the girls at the next table giggled and said, "She's probably scared to open her mouth. Maybe she doesn't even speak English." Another boy chimed in, "Nah, she's just scared of getting roasted." The crowd's laughter rolled like thunder, loud, heartless, and ugly. Amira finally stood up, holding the empty tray against her chest. Her dark eyes lifted, steady and unflinching, to meet Brandon's. She didn't glare. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, quiet, patient, and impossibly calm. That simple look made a few students fall silent, unsure why they suddenly felt uneasy. But Brandon wasn't one to back down. Not when an audience was watching. His pride depended on this moment. "Look at her," one of his friends snorted, too scared to say anything. Brandon's grin widened. "Yeah," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance, "she wouldn't last 2 minutes in a fight." That got a few laughs, and Brandon's confidence swelled. He straightened his shoulders, took a mock fighting stance, and said, "You know what? Let's test it out." His tone was joking, but his eyes weren't. They were sharp, mean, and hungry for dominance. The cafeteria hushed slightly. Some students leaned forward, phones still recording. Others looked uncomfortable, but no one stepped in. This was how it always went. Brandon picked someone to humiliate, everyone laughed, and the teachers arrived too late. Then Brandon moved. It happened in a blink. He stepped closer and pretended to throw a knee strike, fast, sharp, aimed right toward Amira's face. He stopped just short, inches from her nose. Gasps erupted all around. Someone even screamed. The entire cafeteria froze. But Amira didn't flinch. Her body shifted just enough to the side, a motion so smooth and instinctive it looked effortless. Her tray dropped with a metallic clang. Before anyone realized what was happening, Amira's hand shot up, gripping Brandon's wrist midair. The movement was fluid, like a dancer's, but faster. In one graceful twist, she turned her body, and Brandon's arm was suddenly pinned behind his back. He tried to pull free, but he couldn't move. She hadn't hurt him, not really, but her grip was firm, precise, and controlled. There was no hesitation, no fear. Just strength. "Whoa," someone shouted. "What just happened?" The crowd was stunned into silence. Brandon's friends looked at each other, unsure whether to jump in or back away. For the first time, Brandon wasn't laughing. His smirk was gone, replaced by shock and a flicker of fear. Amira leaned in slightly, her voice low but steady. "Don't," she said simply. "Don't do that again." Those 5 words landed heavier than any punch could have. She didn't shout them. She didn't threaten him. She just said them, and everyone heard. The room stayed dead quiet. The laughter was gone. The only sound was Brandon's uneven breathing and the faint hum of the vending machine in the corner. Amira released his arm, took a step back, and picked up her backpack. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the cafeteria. The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon stood frozen, his face red, his ego shattered. His friends stared at him, speechless. A few students started whispering. "Did you see that? She flipped him like it was nothing. How did she do that?" By the time a teacher rushed in to ask what had happened, Amira was already gone. But her name, the quiet girl no one cared to know, was now on everyone's lips. That was the day everything changed. No one knew who Amira really was yet. No one knew about the years of training, the tournaments, the discipline behind that calm face. All they knew was that she had just silenced the loudest bully in the entire school, without shouting, without rage, without even raising her voice. She didn't have to. Her strength spoke louder than anything she could have said. In a flash too fast for anyone to process, Amira moved. Her lunch tray hit the floor with a metallic clang, milk and spaghetti splattering everywhere, but no one even blinked, all eyes were on her. Brandon's mock knee strike sliced through empty air as Amira slid smoothly to the side, her movement fluid, instinctive, like she had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Before Brandon could even register what had happened, her hand shot up and clamped around his wrist. It wasn't the sloppy grip of someone panicking, it was sharp, deliberate, and precise. The next moment, her body rotated just slightly, her weight shifting perfectly to trap his momentum. In one swift, seamless motion, Brandon's arm was twisted behind his back, not painfully, but firmly enough that he couldn't move. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. The laughter that had echoed seconds ago vanished like smoke. The only sound left was Brandon's sharp inhale and the squeak of his sneakers on the tile floor. He tried to jerk his arm free, but Amira's hold was unbreakable, strong yet controlled. Her face was calm, expression unreadable, her breathing steady. She didn't look angry, or scared, or even proud. She just looked centered, like someone completely at peace even in the middle of chaos. Brandon's voice cracked slightly. Hey, what are you doing?" he stammered, trying to sound tough, but his tone betrayed him. No one had ever made him look weak, not in front of his friends, not in front of an audience. Amira didn't answer. She took a slow breath, her dark eyes locked on his. The stillness around them felt almost unreal. Every student in that cafeteria felt the shift, the power dynamic flipping in a heartbeat. The bully who had ruled the school with laughter and intimidation now stood frozen, powerless in the hands of the girl everyone had mocked. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear, each word cutting through the silence. "Don't do that again." That was it. No yelling. No threats. Just 5 simple words, calm, measured, and terrifyingly confident. Her tone wasn't angry, it was certain, like she wasn't giving a warning but a fact. Brandon's eyes darted around. Dozens of phones were pointed at them now, recording every second. His face flushed red, from pain, from embarrassment, from disbelief. He tried to laugh it off, forcing a weak grin. "Hey, chill, it was just a joke," he muttered, but his voice trembled. "Let go, man," one of his friends whispered. But Brandon couldn't. He wasn't in control anymore, she was. Amira slowly loosened her grip, releasing his arm. Brandon stumbled a step backward, rubbing his wrist, his pride burning hotter than the sting of her hold. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the cafeteria felt heavy, like everyone was afraid to even breathe. Then, quietly, Amira reached down, picked up her fallen bag, and slung it over her shoulder. She didn't look at anyone else. She didn't say another word. She just walked toward the exit, her shoes echoing softly against the linoleum floor. The crowd parted as she passed, a sea of wide eyes and open mouths. Even the teachers at the far end of the room hadn't seen enough to understand what had happened, they just saw the school's biggest bully standing stunned and silent, and the quiet new girl walking out like nothing had happened. One of Brandon's friends, Marcus, broke the silence first. He blinked, disbelief written all over his face. "Dude, she just reversed your move." No one laughed this time. No one dared. Brandon straightened up, trying to salvage what was left of his pride. "It wasn't that big a deal," he muttered, his voice low and defensive. But everyone knew it was. His usual swagger was gone. His jaw clenched, his knuckles tight around the edge of a chair. He wanted to say something, anything, that could turn the moment back in his favor, but there was nothing. No words could undo what everyone had just seen. For years, Brandon had made others feel small. He had built his reputation on fear and noise. But in less than 5 seconds, Amira, the quiet, polite, unassuming new girl, had dismantled all of it without even raising her voice. A murmur rippled through the crowd as people began whispering. "Did you see that? How did she do that so fast? Was that karate or something?" Someone even whispered, "She looked like a pro." Brandon's friends exchanged uneasy glances. They'd never seen anyone handle him like that. And though none of them would admit it out loud, there was a strange sense of respect, and maybe even a little fear, for the girl who had just left. As Amira disappeared through the cafeteria doors, the energy of the room felt completely different. The laughter didn't return. The noise didn't resume. Instead, there was a quiet buzz, the kind that comes right before a story spreads like wildfire. Everyone had their phones out now, replaying the short clip they'd captured, each one trying to understand how something so quick and graceful could feel so powerful. Brandon sat down slowly, his face pale, his ego bruised more than his arm. For the first time, he didn't feel untouchable. He felt small. And though he didn't realize it yet, that moment would change him, and the entire school, forever. Because what had happened in that cafeteria wasn't just a moment of humiliation. It was the start of a legend. Coach Daniels raised an eyebrow. Karate? Not quite. He looked down at his clipboard again, double-checking the notes. Then he smiled. Actually, Amira's a registered Muay Thai national champion. She trained in Thailand for 6 years. For a moment, the gym went completely still. The sound of sneakers squeaking, the bouncing of basketballs in the other half of the gym, everything stopped. Every head turned toward Amira, who stood quietly near the back of the group, arms folded, her expression calm and unreadable. Brandon's smirk vanished. "Wait, what?" he stammered. Coach Daniels nodded, clearly impressed. "She's competed internationally, one of the youngest in her division. Real deal." The class erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "That explains everything." Brandon just stood there, mouth slightly open, looking like he'd been punched in the stomach. The coach clapped his hands. "All right, Amira, since you've got some experience, how about helping me demonstrate?" Amira hesitated for a second, then nodded politely. She stepped forward, her movements graceful, controlled. Even walking, she carried herself differently, balanced, deliberate. The students fell completely silent, eyes locked on her. "Let's start simple," coach said. "Basic stance, defense, and counter." Amira nodded again. She took her position opposite the coach, feet shoulder-width apart, hands up, her posture flawless. Then, in a single breath, she moved, pivoting, blocking, striking, each motion precise and purposeful. Her kicks were sharp, her punches fast but fluid, her balance never wavering. It was like watching a dancer, but there was nothing gentle about it. Every motion had weight, discipline, and confidence behind it. Coach Daniels, who was no stranger to martial arts himself, took a few mock swings to demonstrate attacks, and each time, Amira deflected effortlessly, light on her feet, calm as water. After one combination, she landed a counterstrike so clean and quick that the entire class gasped. Brandon's friends stood frozen. "Dude," one of them whispered, "she's legit." The coach laughed, shaking his head in amazement. "All right, class, you see that? That's control. That's skill. She's not fighting with anger, not swinging wild, she's thinking, timing, using precision. That's what separates a fighter from a bully." Those last words hung in the air. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He couldn't. As the demonstration went on, everyone watched in awe. When Amira finished, the class burst into applause. It wasn't forced or polite, it was real. The same students who had laughed at her 2 days ago were now cheering for her. Amira just smiled shyly, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, and stepped back. After class, a few girls came up to her, asking questions. "Did it hurt to train like that? How long did it take to learn? Can you teach us?" For the first time since arriving, Amira laughed, a small, genuine laugh that made everyone around her smile. Even Brandon lingered nearby, pretending to tie his shoe just to listen. He didn't say anything, but deep down, he knew he owed her an apology. And something else, respect. That day, the whispers around the school changed. They weren't mocking anymore. Now they carried a different tone, admiration. "She's not just the quiet girl," one student said. "She's the champion." And just like that, Amira's silence wasn't seen as weakness anymore, it was seen as strength. Quiet. Focused. Unshakable. The kind of strength no one could ever laugh at again. The next day, rumors spread like wildfire. By the time the first bell rang, the story of what had happened in the cafeteria had twisted into a dozen versions. Some said Amira had broken Brandon's arm. Others claimed she'd flipped him over the table like in a martial arts movie. A few even whispered that she'd been kicked out of her old school for fighting. Everyone had their own version, but the truth was simpler, and far more powerful. Still, the entire school buzzed with curiosity. Wherever Amira went, whispers followed her. Students turned in the hallways, watching her with new eyes, a mix of awe, suspicion, and fear. She didn't walk any differently, didn't act smug or proud. She was the same quiet girl, head slightly lowered, books clutched close to her chest. But something had changed. The energy around her had shifted. Even teachers seemed to treat her with a touch more respect, though most didn't even know why. Brandon, meanwhile, was doing everything he could to save face. It wasn't a big deal, he kept telling people. She just got lucky, that's all. But no one believed him. The video that had surfaced, a few blurry seconds of Amira twisting his arm effortlessly, had already spread around campus. It wasn't luck. It was skill. Everyone could see it. And that made him furious. By the time gym class rolled around that afternoon, tension hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Coach Daniels, a broad-shouldered man with a booming voice and a permanent whistle around his neck, stood at the center of the gym, clipboard in hand. "All right, listen up," he barked. "For the next few weeks, we're doing a self-defense unit. I want everyone partnered up." The class groaned. A few boys cracked jokes about how they didn't need to learn self-defense. Brandon, of course, was one of them. "What's this, coach?" he said with a smirk. "You teaching us how to slap fight?" The students laughed, but the coach just smirked back. "You might learn something, Carter," he said. Then, as he scanned his list, his eyes landed on Amira. "Actually, we've got someone here who already has a bit of experience," he said casually. Heads turned immediately. Brandon rolled his eyes. "Yeah, the new girl probably knows karate or something," he said loudly, grinning at his friends. The laughter that followed was nervous, uncertain, as if even they weren't sure whether it was safe to tease her anymore. Coach Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Karate? Not quite." He looked down at his clipboard again, double-checking the notes. Then he smiled. "Actually, Amira's a registered Muay Thai national champion. She trained in Thailand for 6 years." For a moment, the gym went completely still. The sound of sneakers squeaking, the bouncing of basketballs in the other half of the gym, everything stopped. Every head turned toward Amira, who stood quietly near the back of the group, arms folded, her expression calm and unreadable. Brandon's smirk vanished. "Wait, what?" he stammered. Coach Daniels nodded, clearly impressed. "She's competed internationally, one of the youngest in her division. Real deal." The class erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "That explains everything." Brandon just stood there, mouth slightly open, looking like he'd been punched in the stomach. The coach clapped his hands. "All right, Amira, since you've got some experience, how about helping me demonstrate?" Amira hesitated for a second, then nodded politely. She stepped forward, her movements graceful, controlled. Even walking, she carried herself differently, balanced, deliberate. The students fell completely silent, eyes locked on her. "Let's start simple," coach said. "Basic stance, defense, and counter." Amira nodded again. She took her position opposite the coach, feet shoulder-width apart, hands up, her posture flawless. Then, in a single breath, she moved, pivoting, blocking, striking, each motion precise and purposeful. Her kicks were sharp, her punches fast but fluid, her balance never wavering. It was like watching a dancer, but there was nothing gentle about it. Every motion had weight, discipline, and confidence behind it. Coach Daniels, who was no stranger to martial arts himself, took a few mock swings to demonstrate attacks, and each time, Amira deflected effortlessly, light on her feet, calm as water. After one combination, she landed a counterstrike so clean and quick that the entire class gasped. Brandon's friends stood frozen. "Dude," one of them whispered, "she's legit." The coach laughed, shaking his head in amazement. "Alright, class, you see that? That's control. That's skill. She's not fighting with anger, not swinging wild, she's thinking, timing, using precision. That's what separates a fighter from a bully." Those last words hung in the air. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He couldn't. As the demonstration went on, everyone watched in awe. When Amira finished, the class burst into applause. It wasn't forced or polite, it was real. The same students who had laughed at her 2 days ago were now cheering for her. Amira just smiled shyly, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, and stepped back. After class, a few girls came up to her, asking questions. "Did it hurt to train like that? How long did it take to learn? Can you teach us?" For the first time since arriving, Amira laughed, a small, genuine laugh that made everyone around her smile. Even Brandon lingered nearby, pretending to tie his shoe just to listen. He didn't say anything, but deep down, he knew he owed her an apology. And something else, respect. That day, the whispers around the school changed. They weren't mocking anymore. Now they carried a different tone, admiration. "She's not just the quiet girl," one student said. "She's the champion." By the end of that unforgettable week, everything at Ridgeway High had changed. The same students who once mocked Amira in the cafeteria now whispered her name with respect. They didn't call her the weird new girl anymore. Now, she was Amira, the Muay Thai champion. Her story had spread far beyond the school halls. Students from other grades came just to see her in gym class, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl who had humbled the school's biggest bully without ever throwing a real punch. At first, Amira didn't understand why everyone wanted to talk to her. She hadn't set out to impress anyone. All she'd wanted was peace, a place to study, train quietly, and start fresh. But somehow, her silence had spoken louder than any words could. Her calmness in the face of humiliation, her grace after confrontation, had taught everyone something they didn't expect: strength doesn't need to shout to be heard. One afternoon after school, while she was practicing alone in the gym, she heard hesitant footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Brandon, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was filled only with the faint echo of her training gloves brushing against the punching bag. "Hey, about what happened," Brandon started, his voice low. "I was just joking around." Amira paused, studying him. He looked different, not the loud, arrogant boy from the cafeteria, but someone carrying the weight of guilt. She could have ignored him. She could have humiliated him in front of everyone, the way he had done to her. But that wasn't who she was. "I know," she said softly, tying her hand wraps. "But jokes can hurt too." Brandon nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I guess I didn't think about that." Amira gave him a small, patient smile. "It's okay," she said, then picked up an extra pair of gloves and tossed them toward him. "You can stay. I'll teach you, but only if you're serious." For a moment, Brandon looked stunned. Then, slowly, he smiled back. "Yeah," he said, slipping the gloves on awkwardly. "I'm serious." From that day forward, Brandon became one of her most dedicated students. Every afternoon, he showed up at the gym, sometimes bruised, always exhausted, but never quitting. Amira taught him the basics: how to stand, how to breathe, how to balance his strength with control. But more importantly, she taught him humility. Muay Thai isn't about hurting people, she told him once, between rounds. It's about respect, for yourself, and for others. Brandon nodded, drenched in sweat. "Yeah," he said, panting, I get that now. As days turned into weeks, more students joined. At first, they just watched from the bleachers, curious. Then one by one, they asked to learn too, not to fight, but to find that same calm confidence Amira carried. By the end of the month, the gym that once echoed with laughter and taunts now pulsed with teamwork and focus. Even Coach Daniels helped organize after-school sessions so Amira could teach self-defense and discipline to anyone who wanted to learn. And something amazing happened, the bullying stopped. Not just toward Amira, but toward everyone. Brandon's crew, once the loudest group in the cafeteria, now helped younger students with their homework or joined practice drills. The energy of the entire school shifted. People started saying things like, Amira doesn't just fight, she inspires. Teachers noticed the change too. The principal even stopped by one afternoon to thank her. You've done more for this school in 1 month than most adults could in a year, she said warmly. Amira blushed and bowed slightly, out of habit. Thank you, ma'am, she replied. But Amira never saw herself as a hero. To her, this was simply what she'd been taught, the art of balance. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that Muay Thai was about discipline, not dominance, about heart, not hate. And now, here she was, passing that same wisdom to others. One evening, after another long session, the gym slowly emptied out. The sounds of laughter faded down the hallway as the last group of students left. Amira stayed behind, unwrapping her hands, her body tired but her heart light. She walked to the window and gazed out at the horizon. The sunset painted the sky in strokes of gold and deep orange, the same colors she used to see in Thailand during her early morning training sessions. For the first time since she'd moved, she felt at home. Behind her, Brandon walked up, carrying the mats to help clean up. You know, he said, smiling awkwardly, you've kind of changed everything around here. Amira turned slightly, her expression soft. Not me, she said. We did. He chuckled. Maybe. But it started with you. Amira looked out the window again, her reflection blending with the fading light. Maybe it started the day I stopped hiding who I was, she said quietly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was peaceful now, no longer the kind that made her feel small, but the kind that filled her with pride. As the sky darkened and the last rays of light slipped below the horizon, Amira smiled, not because she had proven herself, but because she no longer had to. The world around her had finally seen her for who she truly was, not the quiet girl, not the target, but a champion. A champion not just in the ring, but in life, strong, graceful, and unshakably kind. And from that day forward, Ridgeway High would never forget the girl who taught them that real strength doesn't shout, it shines. Sunrise.